Picture this. A 63-year-old great-grandmother sits in a concrete cell serving year 21 of a life sentence without the possibility of parole. No release date, no hope, no chance of ever holding her grandchildren again. Her crime? A first-time non-violent drug offense that never involved her touching, selling, or even seeing a single gram of cocaine. Now picture this. The most famous reality TV star in the world scrolling through Twitter on an ordinary October evening in 2017 when she stumbles upon a video that will change both of their lives forever. This is the story of Alice Marie Johnson, a woman sentenced to what she called an unexecuted death sentence, and the unlikely savior who would move heaven, earth, and the Oval Office to set her free. But what makes this case truly shocking isn't just the grotesque injustice of Alice's sentence. It's what happened to the co-defendants who testified against her. Stay with me, because when you hear how this story ends, you'll understand why sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places. To understand how Alice Marie Johnson ended up with a life sentence for a crime that typically carries a few years, we need to go back to May 30th, 1955, when Alice was born in Olive Branch, Mississippi. She was one of 9 children born to sharecroppers, a family that knew poverty intimately, but also knew the value of hard work and faith. Alice's life followed a familiar American story at first. She became pregnant as a sophomore in high school, but she didn't let that derail her future. She worked as a secretary and later landed what felt like her dream job at FedEx in Memphis, Tennessee, where she worked diligently for 10 years. Alice had built herself a stable life. She was a single mother of 5 children, working hard to provide for her family and keep a roof over their heads. But then, life dealt Alice a series of devastating blows that would push her toward a decision that would destroy everything she had built. First, Alice developed a gambling addiction. What started as occasional trips to the casino became an obsession that consumed her savings and threatened her job security. When her addiction was discovered, FedEx terminated her employment after a decade of dedicated service. Alice found herself unemployed with 5 children to feed. The second blow came when her marriage fell apart. The financial stress, combined with the shame of her gambling addiction and job loss, tore her family apart. Alice found herself facing divorce proceedings while struggling to make ends meet. But the third blow, the one that would push Alice to her breaking point, was the most devastating of all. Her youngest son was killed in a motorcycle accident. Alice later described this as the moment when she completely lost hope. She was grieving, broke, divorced, unemployed, and about to lose her house to foreclosure. In 1991, Alice filed for bankruptcy. By 1993, foreclosure was imminent. She was facing the prospect of becoming homeless with her children. It was at this desperate moment that someone offered Alice what seemed like a lifeline, an opportunity to make quick money by becoming involved in a drug trafficking operation based in Memphis. Alice later told Mick in a 2017 interview that this was one of the worst decisions of my life to make quick money. But when you're a mother facing homelessness, desperation can make even the worst decisions seem reasonable. What exactly was Alice's role in this operation? According to her own admission in court records, Alice never sold drugs. She never handled drugs. She never even saw cocaine. Instead, she allowed those involved with drugs to use her phone, relayed messages for them, and held money for one of the individuals involved. Alice described herself as what could be called a telephone mule, someone who facilitated communication between members of the trafficking organization. She allowed people to use her phone and relayed coded messages. She says that she never brokered any deals or handled drugs, but was responsible for relaying coded messages over the phone. The Memphis-based cocaine trafficking operation Alice became involved with was substantial. The Memphis operation involved over a dozen individuals and dealt in 2,000 to 3,000 kilograms of cocaine. Evidence presented at trial showed that the Memphis operation was connected to Colombian drug dealers based in Texas. For a period between 1991 and 1994, Alice earned money by serving as a communication facilitator for this network. She was, by all accounts, a low-level participant who never rose to any position of leadership within the organization. On a November day in 1994, Alice's world came crashing down. Johnson was arrested as part of a massive federal investigation that swept up 16 defendants in the Memphis cocaine trafficking organization. What happened next would showcase everything wrong with America's criminal justice system in the 1990s. Alice was charged with 8 federal criminal counts, including money laundering, conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute cocaine, attempted possession of cocaine with intent to distribute and deliver, structuring a monetary transaction, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The money laundering and structuring charges came from her purchase of a house with a down payment structured to avoid hitting a $10,000 reporting threshold. When Alice went to trial in 1996, she faced a system designed to extract maximum sentences, not necessarily maximum justice. The federal prosecutors painted a picture of Alice as a major player in the organization. The indictment, which named 16 defendants, described her as a leader in a multi-million-dollar cocaine ring and detailed dozens of drug transactions and deliveries. But here's where the story takes a truly dark turn, one that reveals the twisted incentives built into our justice system. During the trial, 10 of her co-defendants testified against her in exchange for reduced or dropped charges. Let me repeat that. 10 of the 16 people charged in this same operation were offered deals to testify against Alice in exchange for lighter sentences. Johnson, however, did not receive the same mercy despite having no previous drug charges. Think about that for a moment. Alice had never been arrested before. This was her first offense. She was a first-time, nonviolent drug offender. Yet she was the one who received the harshest possible sentence. When U.S. District Judge Julia Gibbons sentenced Alice in 1997, the words she spoke would haunt Alice for the next 2 decades. Judge Julia Gibbons said that Johnson was the quintessential entrepreneur in an operation that dealt in 2,000 to 3,000 kilograms of cocaine with a very significant impact on the community. Alice Marie Johnson was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus 25 years. Let me say that again, life without parole plus 25 years. For a first-time offender who never touched drugs, Alice was numb. I couldn't believe I was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. My family was in the courtroom, and when they announced it, there was an audible gasp. Alice later described her sentence perfectly. It's like an unexecuted sentence of death. My family told me that coming to visit me in prison is like visiting a gravesite. But here's the truly shocking part, the detail that reveals just how broken the system was. Remember those co-defendants who testified against Alice? Co-defendants Curtis McDonald and Jerlene McNeil were sentenced to life and 19 years in federal prison, respectively. A number of other co-defendants who testified against Johnson received sentences between probation and 10 years. Only one other received a life sentence. Think about this. People who were involved in the same operation, some of whom may have played larger roles than Alice, received sentences ranging from probation to 10 years. Alice got life without parole. This wasn't justice. This was a system that rewarded cooperation over actual culpability, that prioritized convictions over fairness, and that destroyed lives in the name of being tough on crime. The U.S. Bureau of Prisons sent Alice 1,500 miles away from her family to serve her sentence, first in California, then in Texas, and finally in Alabama. The physical distance was devastating. It wasn't a day trip to visit me. Female prisons are more spread out than men's. My first prison was in California, a long way from my family. My second prison was in Texas, a 10 or 11-hour trip. For even a short visit, my family had to make plans to spend the night. For Alice, the distance meant missing everything that mattered. The birth of my grandchildren was the hardest, not being able to hold them when they were born, brand new in the world, or see them grow up like a grandmother should. I missed all the Christmases and Thanksgivings. When family members died, Alice couldn't attend their funerals. I couldn't go to the funeral of my mother, of my father, of my oldest sister. But Alice refused to let the system break her spirit. Instead of becoming bitter, she became better. She exhibited good behavior in prison. In a memoir written after her release, she wrote that she served time at the Federal Medical Center, Carswell, the federal prison hospital in Texas, where she became a certified hospice worker and was subsequently transferred to FCI Aliceville to be closer to family. During her time in prison, Johnson said she relied on her faith in God, volunteered as a hospice worker, mentored other incarcerated women, and even wrote theater plays. "One of the things I'm most proud of, I write plays, and the plays that I write have been viewed by literally thousands of women. It is so exciting to find talent in women that they never knew they had, to recognize it and develop it, and to show them that you can do this." Alice became an ordained minister while in prison. She tutored other prisoners working toward their GEDs. In letters supporting her bid for clemency, staff members at FCI Aliceville wrote that Johnson did not commit any disciplinary infractions during her incarceration at FCI Aliceville. While Alice was transforming herself and helping others behind bars, advocates on the outside were fighting for her freedom. The ACLU began featuring Alice's case as part of their campaign against life sentences for non-violent offenses. Seeking to tell the stories of the living dead, or the over 3,200 people serving life sentences without parole for non-violent offenses, they highlighted Alice's case as an example of everything wrong with mandatory minimum sentencing laws. In 2014, Alice's case was one of 16,776 petitions filed in the Obama administration's 2014 Clemency Project. Alice fit all the criteria for the Clemency Project perfectly. She was a first-time, nonviolent offender who had served more than a decade and had an exemplary prison record. In 2016, Alice wrote an op-ed for CNN asking for forgiveness and a second chance, hoping to catch President Obama's attention. Then, in December 2016, came what seemed like Alice's moment of hope. President Obama pardoned 231 individuals in December 2016, many of whom had similar drug-related charges. Alice and her family were certain she would be among them, but her application was denied just before Obama left office. No explanation was given. When Alice's clemency petition was denied by President Obama without explanation in the final days of his presidency, "I was shocked and devastated," said Jennifer Turner of the ACLU, who had worked closely with Alice's case. Alice had served 23 years. She had done everything right. She had transformed her life and helped countless others, but she was going to die in prison, or so it seemed. Johnson participated in a pilot program introduced in 2016 by Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates that provided video conferencing access to certain female federal prisoners. The program allowed the online publication Plea to record a video interview with her that went viral and brought her case to public attention. The video was heartbreaking. Alice, wearing a gray prison uniform, spoke about her case, her family, and her hope for freedom. She talked about missing the births of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about the pain of not being able to attend family funerals, and about her determination to make something positive out of her situation. The video was shared widely on social media, viewed by millions, and featured prominently by criminal justice reform advocates. But on the evening of October 25, 2017, it caught the attention of someone unexpected. On the evening of October 25, 2017, they were scrolling through Twitter when they came across a video that changed two lives. Someone had retweeted a video telling the story of Alice Marie Johnson. A 62-year-old great-grandmother had been in prison for 21 years for a first-time nonviolent drug offense. How is that possible? The person scrolling through Twitter that night was Kim Kardashian West. I watched as Miss Alice told the story of how her desperation, after losing her job and struggling to put food on the table for her children, led her to make a bad decision that resulted in her being sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Kim was moved to tears by Alice's story. But more than that, she was moved to action. In prison, Kim's advocacy caught Alice off guard. "I didn't even know who Kim Kardashian was." When asked what grabbed her attention about Johnson's case, Kardashian said she felt this connection to Johnson when she learned about her story. "I decided to reach out to my friend Sean Hawley, who had worked on the OJ case with my dad back in 1995. I had an odd obsession with true crime, but I had no real experience with the legal system and no idea if there was anything I could do to help Alice. but I just knew I had to try. Sean Hawley was a renowned criminal defense attorney whose clients had included O.J. Simpson, Michael Jackson, and Lindsay Lohan. Kim asked me several weeks ago how she could help Alice Johnson in her fight for justice. We then began corresponding with Alice and her team of lawyers. But Kim didn't stop there. I then decided to reach out to Ivanka Trump. I had known Ivanka and her family for years, and I felt that Ivanka would have compassion as a woman and as a mom and would understand how important this was. Ivanka listened to everything I had to say and felt the same way I did. She connected me with her husband, Jared Kushner, who was passionate about criminal justice reform and believed in Alice's case. Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, had made criminal justice reform one of his top priorities in the White House. Kushner has made criminal justice reform one of his top priorities and has hosted a series of bipartisan dinners on the topic alongside his wife, senior White House advisor Ivanka Trump. Kardashian and Kushner's phone conversations about Johnson picked up in recent weeks, which prompted Kushner to bring Johnson's file in front of White House attorneys and then Trump about a potential release. Kim was building a coalition of support for Alice that reached all the way to the Oval Office, but she knew that ultimately she would need to make a personal appeal to President Trump himself. On May 30th, 2018, Alice's 63rd birthday, Kim Kardashian walked into the White House for a meeting that would change everything. That meeting in the Oval Office took place last week, on Johnson's birthday. It was a sign, the right day to make her plea, Kardashian thought. The meeting was surreal on multiple levels. Here was Kim Kardashian, a reality TV star famous for a sex tape and a show called Keeping Up with the Kardashians, sitting in the Oval Office with President Donald Trump, arguing for the freedom of a woman she had never met. In an exclusive interview with Meek after that meeting, Kardashian said, "Trump really spent the time to listen to our case that we were making for Alice. He really understood, and I am very hopeful that this will turn out really positively." Kardashian, who had met Trump several times before he became president, said he felt it. He was compassionate. He was sympathetic to her. She kept the focus on Johnson during the meeting, she said. This wasn't about publicity for Kim. This was about justice for Alice. During the meeting, Trump told Kim he would look into Alice's case. Daily phone calls with the White House followed. But Kardashian didn't want to take too much credit for Johnson's release and acknowledged the advocacy of others who were trying to help Johnson throughout the years. Everyone has brought attention to this case, and I just happened to see it on Twitter. So I do want to give credit where credit is due to everyone that's been working so hard on this for so long for her. On June 6, 2018, exactly 1 week after Kim's White House meeting, Alice was going about her normal routine at FCI Aliceville when she received an unexpected phone call. It was Kim Kardashian. When Kim Kardashian West learned that Alice Marie Johnson, a nonviolent drug offender serving a life sentence, would be freed, she broke the news to her in a tearful phone call. "I was like, you're going home," Kardashian said Thursday, recalling the conversation. Johnson, 63, who had spent a third of her life in prison, screamed. "We cried, maybe on the phone for like 3 minutes straight," an emotional Kardashian told CNN's Van Jones. Brittany Barnett, a member of Johnson's legal team, said Johnson learned of her commutation on a call with Kardashian and her lawyers. Kardashian delivered the news. Johnson told her legal team and Kardashian that she feels like she has been resurrected from the dead, Barnett said. President Trump had commuted Alice's sentence. After serving 21 years in federal prison, Alice Marie Johnson was going home. Hours later, Alice walked out of FCI Aliceville to a crowd of family members she hadn't been able to hug in over 2 decades. In video footage from the scene, Johnson said, "I want to thank Donald John Trump," with cheers and screams in the background as she wiped away tears. "He gave me another chance in life and restored me to my family." Johnson added, "I want to thank Kim Kardashian West. Thank you, Kim. I'm free to live life and free to start over. I have a lot of catching up to do with my family. I can't wait to get back in the workforce and get back to my community." "She has truly been relentless in her fight for me," Johnson said of Kardashian West. But here's where this story takes its most shocking turn. The revelation that exposes just how broken the system truly was. Remember Curtis McDonald, Alice's co-defendant, who also received a life sentence like Alice but didn't have a celebrity champion? McDonald was the last co-defendant still behind bars in the drug trafficking operation that involved prison reform advocate Alice Marie Johnson, who was granted clemency by President Trump in 2018. While Alice was free and rebuilding her life, Curtis remained in federal prison, serving the same life sentence for the same crime. Curtis McDonald was convicted in 1996 for drug trafficking and money laundering and is now 70 years old. After a jury trial, he was sentenced to life in prison. He was a first-time offender who has now served nearly 24 years in prison and has an excellent record of good conduct. But what happens if harshly convicted prisoners don't have a celebrity champion fighting for their freedom? McDonald is the only one of the 16 suspects in the original indictment who is still serving time in prison. Think about this. 16 people were indicted in the same operation. 10 of them testified against Alice in exchange for reduced sentences ranging from probation to 10 years. Alice got life without parole, but was freed after 21 years thanks to Kim Kardashian's intervention. Curtis McDonald, also sentenced to life, remained in prison for an additional 2 years, simply because he didn't have a famous advocate. The third co-defendant, who received a harsh sentence, Jerlian McNeil, got 19 years and was likely released much earlier than Alice or Curtis. This reveals the most disturbing aspect of Alice's case. Justice wasn't blind. It wasn't based on the severity of the crime or the level of involvement. It was based on who had the best legal representation, who was willing to testify against others, and ultimately, who had the most powerful advocates. Now it can be our turn. Melody Martin, McDonald's niece, told Fox 13, "I'm very hopeful." Martin was a senior in high school when her uncle was given a life sentence for the non-violent crime. Alice didn't forget about Curtis. Johnson celebrated her reunion with family on her co-conspirator's 68th birthday. McDonald's family hopes he'll be given the same second chance before another year of life passes. In October 2020, President Trump finally commuted Curtis McDonald's sentence as well. On Wednesday, McDonald walked out of the correctional institution to greetings from family he hadn't seen in years. He had served 24 years for the same crime that Alice served 21 years for. The partnership between Kim Kardashian and Alice Marie Johnson didn't end with Alice's release. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in both of their lives. "Now that I have a voice, I'm going to use it to fight for those who are still incarcerated, who don't have a voice like I have right now," she told the ACLU after her release. Kim, inspired by her work on Alice's case, enrolled in law school and began studying to become a lawyer herself. Kardashian, who is studying to become a lawyer, felt immediate sympathy when she learned about Johnson's story. "Alice always thanks me, but I always thank her because through this process, I feel like she's really given me purpose. And I think to find your purpose in life and to find what you can do for other people is such a powerful thing," says Kim, who was inspired to go to law school after fighting for Alice's freedom. Alice's case became a catalyst for broader criminal justice reform. Sparked by this energy, the First Step Act passed in Congress at the end of 2018, signifying the first major bipartisan criminal justice legislation passed in decades. When Trump delivered his State of the Union address on February 5, 2019, Johnson was a guest of the president. Trump asked her to stand up to be recognized, and she received a standing ovation from members of Congress. On August 28, 2020, one day after Johnson spoke at the 2020 Republican National Convention, Trump granted her a full pardon. And he didn't stop there. In 2025, in an unprecedented move, President Trump appointed Alice as his administration's pardon czar, the first person to ever hold this position, where she would recommend other prisoners for clemency. Alice published her memoir, Afterlife: My Journey from Incarceration to Freedom, with a foreword written by Kim Kardashian. She founded the Taking Action for Good Foundation to help others obtain clemency. Kim says there are more Alices out there. She hopes to tell more of those stories. So does Alice. So do I. The story of Alice Marie Johnson exposes the darkest aspects of America's criminal justice system. The mandatory minimum sentences that destroy lives, the prosecutorial tactics that prioritize convictions over justice, and the reality that your fate often depends more on your legal representation than your actual guilt or innocence. These mandatory minimums must be struck down. There must never be a time that a non-violent first offender like myself can receive the harshest sentence next to the death penalty. Life without the possibility of parole. You're saying that my life is not redeemable. But Alice's story also reveals something beautiful about human nature. That justice can come from the most unexpected places. That celebrities can use their platforms for profound good. And that sometimes the most unlikely partnerships can change the world. Alice spent 21 years in prison for serving as a telephone intermediary in a drug operation she joined out of desperation. 10 of her co-defendants testified against her in exchange for far lighter sentences. She received life without parole, while those who may have played larger roles walked free years earlier. The system failed Alice Marie Johnson spectacularly. But Kim Kardashian, a reality TV star with no legal training, succeeded where the system had failed. Through determination, celebrity influence, and genuine compassion, Kim helped right one of the most egregious wrongs in modern criminal justice. Today, Alice Marie Johnson is not just free, she's helping to free others. She's not just a survivor of injustice, she's a warrior against it. And Kim Kardashian isn't just a reality TV star anymore. She's a law student and criminal justice reform advocate who proved that sometimes the most powerful voice for justice comes from the most unexpected source. It's easy to focus on the wrongs of the past. It's much harder, and it turns out much more life-changing, to fight for a future where those wrongs are made right for others. Alice's story reminds us that behind every statistic about mass incarceration is a human being, someone's mother, grandmother, daughter, or sister. And sometimes, it takes a reality TV star scrolling through Twitter on an October evening to remind the world that justice delayed is justice denied, but justice can still be won when the right people refuse to give up. It's important to remember that wrongful convictions are not confined to innocent people sentenced for crimes they didn't commit, but branch out much further to ridiculous mandatory sentences and extremely harsh and long-term sentences for nonviolent and first-time offenders. Alice Marie Johnson's case raises profound questions about fairness, mercy, and second chances in our justice system. Was her sentence appropriate for a first-time nonviolent offender? Should cooperation with prosecutors result in dramatically different sentences for people involved in the same crime? And how many other Alice Marie Johnsons are still sitting in prison cells across America, serving life sentences for nonviolent offenses, waiting for someone to notice their story? What do you think? Was Alice's original sentence just? Should Kim Kardashian's intervention have been necessary, or should the system have corrected this injustice on its own? And what does Alice's story tell us about who deserves a second chance in America? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Alice's case represents a systemic problem with our justice system, or was it an isolated example of things going wrong? And what role should celebrities play in criminal justice reform?